Sisters and brothers, for the time that is ours to share together this World Communion Sunday, I'd like to preach the fourth installment of this series, Minor Prophets, Major Messages, from the title, A Major Meal. A major meal. Church family, there are many things I love about being a pastor. I love walking beside people during the transitions of life. I love training and releasing disciples for service in the church and in the world. I love teaching and preaching the Word of God. I love taking people down in the waters of baptism and witness as they are buried beneath those life-giving waters and raised to walk in the newness of life that only Jesus Christ can afford. I love doing all of these things and so much more. One of my favorite things about being a pastor is presiding over the ordinance of Holy Communion. I love serving the Lord's table. And I must admit today, I've always had a special affection for communion. I was blessed to have grown up in a church-going household, parented by an elder and a deaconess. That was back in the day when we had deaconesses, but we thank God that we moved beyond that now. We've had the divine revelation that women are just as qualified as men to operate in every office in the Lord's church. Both deacon and pastor. Let the church say, Amen. But even as a child, I loved communion. Though I am a millennial, I grew up in a very traditional church, and we didn't have these fancy pre-packaged communion packets we have now. But we had real bread. And that real Welch's Concord grape. So I loved watching my mother as a deaconess mix, roll out, and bake and cut the communion bread from scratch. Her communion bread didn't taste like these styrofoam things we have now. Her communion bread actually tasted good. I loved it when Mama would slip me one as she was putting them in the communion trays. I loved watching her fill each communion cup with that little white plastic thing with the little lever on top and the spout at the bottom. Y'all know what I'm talking about. She did it with such care so as not to drip any of the juice outside of the cup onto the tray. I loved watching her iron out those white sheets. Back in the day, there were two sheets. There was one that went on the surface of the table. There was another one that went on top of the trays. Y'all remember? I loved watching that top white sheet at the appointed time be lifted up in such a dramatic and synchronized fashion and be folded as if it were a military ceremony. I loved it. Though I didn't realize what was really going on then, I knew that what was happening was something special. As I came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, my love for this ordinance grew, and it still grows each and every time I have the opportunity to come to the table. For it's at the Lord's table where we gather as one to remember the life and death, the resurrection and the soon coming return of Jesus Christ. It's at the Lord's table where we who are battered from the storms and battles of life are renewed in our bodies, minds, and souls for the work and service of God in the world. It's at the Lord's table where we get a glimpse of what it will be like in that new Jerusalem, where all of God's children will be gathered under the blood-stained banner, where all will be at peace, where the sin that destroys us and this world will finally be put to rest. Church, I love communion. This is what we have the blessed opportunity to do every first Sunday. But especially today on World Communion Sunday, as saints all across our great God's globe partake in this holy and sacred meal together. We have the opportunity to remember that this is more than just bread to eat and wine to drink. Yes. This is not just a snack that we get because service is longer that day. But this, what happens here at the Lord's table, is special. That's why we read the same responsive reading every first Sunday. That's why we sing about the blood all service long, to prepare us to partake in this major meal. While all are welcome at the Lord's table at all times, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter how many mistakes you've made, no matter what mistakes you will make in the future, all are welcome here. But at the same time, this major meal is nothing to play with. Breaking bread with God's people is a serious matter. As we continue on in our Minor Prophets Major Messages series, we come to the shortest book in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, by the name of Obadiah. And we see just how serious breaking bread is because of what it represents. You see, the minor prophet Obadiah prophesied during a time when the nations were prideful. Obadiah prophesied during a time when the nations rejoiced at the ruin of another. Obadiah prophesied during a time when the nations gloated over the disasters that befell their fellow human sisters and brothers. Obadiah prophesied during a time when the nations stole from other war-torn peoples in their misfortune. Obadiah prophesied during a time not too unlike the present. The nations are still rejoicing in the ruin of another. Nations are still gloating over the disasters befallen their sisters and brothers in the human family. Just look at Puerto Rico, how the nation has failed to respond. Nations are still attempting to steal from people in their misfortune. Folks keep playing with health care. As Harvard can't seem to pass a budget to save their lives. Or the futures of our children whose schools will go unfunded if they don't get their act together. Church, we are living in times not too unlike Obadiah's, when the nations and the people who make up the nations aren't in right relationship with each other. And not only are they not in a right relationship with each other, they're prideful in the fact that they're not. They laugh at each other's downfall. They rejoice when a disaster comes upon their neighbor. They gloat when their brother, when their sister is cast down. The prophet Obadiah stood boldly to say that God is not happy about it. God's will is that all God's children be in right relationship with Him by being in right relationship with each other. So the question becomes on this World Communion Sunday, as we live in times like Obadiah's, as we have come to partake in this major meal today, when there is so much division and strife and hatred in our world, the question is, how do we get in right relationship with each other? Well, I'm sure this is a question we will spend the rest of our lives trying to answer. I think our first steps to getting it right may be found in the message of this prophet Obadiah. If we are to get our relationships right, the first thing we must do is share the bread without deceit. Look at the text. Verse 7 says, all your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you. You have to understand how outrageous this was. In ancient times, much like today, breaking bread with someone in their homes was one of the most intimate things one could do. So breaking bread with someone while secretly planning their demise would have been and still is an egregious offense. You may say, I don't have a problem with that because I don't eat with folk I don't like. I began this sermon reminiscing on how communion was so special to me at my childhood church. What I didn't tell you was how some of those deaconesses didn't exactly get along. I know we don't have that problem at community. Back in my home church in Nashville, amen. Well, I grew up, as special as I remember communion was, I remember that there was some generational views. One family didn't talk to another family. So they sat on opposite sides of the sanctuary so they didn't have to deal with each other. I remember some people who didn't like other people, who would raise concerns about the nominating committee's report at the annual meeting. And in the spirit of constitutionality and order, voted against the entire slate because of one person, not because they weren't qualified, but because they didn't like it. I remember some conversations that started in the sanctuary and continued on the prayer line as gossip and pettiness poorly disguised as prayer requests. And this happened before and after taking communion together. After sharing bread together as a church family around the Lord's table. If we are to get our relationships right with each other, we cannot share bread with deceit. We don't come to the Lord's table to keep fighting each other. We don't come to the Lord's table to keep on being petty. You don't come to the Lord's table to stay the same. You can do that at your own house, at your own table. If we come to the Lord's table, we come to share bread together so that we can be changed together. We share bread so that we can be transformed together. We share bread so that all might share bread together one day, both at that great banquet in eternity and here on earth. We share bread together so that we can get ourselves together. So we can get organized so our sisters and brothers in Puerto Rico can have bread. And even our sisters and brothers in New Haven and New Hallville on Shelton Avenue can have bread. We don't share bread to cut each other down. We share bread to build each other up. Because if we are going to be in right relationship with one another, we must not only share bread without deceit, we must secondly share the cup without denouncement. Prophet Obadiah says in verse 16, just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they had never been. And what the prophet here was talking about was the nations suffering the consequences of their pride. The prophet was talking about the nations being punished severely for the wrong that they had done to others. See, there were consequences for their actions. And they would play out both in a national and in a personal sense. But the good news for us, church, is today we don't have to share in a cup of denouncement, but we share in a cup without denouncement. It's not because we've done everything right. It's because God made it right. Because we are on the other side of grace. We're living in the New Testament now. We are under a new covenant. Where Jesus fully drank of the punishment and consequences that should have been ours for all the messed up things that we've done. This is why we come to the table, and this is why we repeat the words of Jesus, to remind ourselves that this cup is the new covenant in his blood. His blood that was shed on Calvary's cross. His blood that was spilled on Golgotha's mountain. His blood that was shed for many for the remission or the forgiveness of sin. And it's His blood that still washes. It's His blood that still cleanses. His blood that still saves. His blood that still delivers, and His blood that still sets us free. It's His blood that saved me. His blood that changed my mind. His blood that keeps and covers me. Church folk ought to never tire of shouting over the blood of Jesus. As we come to the Lord's table, as we seek to get back into right relationship with each other, we must share this cup without denouncement. Too often we're guilty of celebrating our own salvation while being quick to condemn others in their sin. We're guilty of shouting on the grace that we got that we don't deserve. When it's time for others to get some grace, we act as if we're fresh out. As we come to the Lord's table, we come sharing the cup without denouncement. We come and we share this cup. It's not a cup of condemnation, but it's a cup of celebration of what Christ has done for us. As we share this cup in celebration of what Christ has done for us, we come celebrating what Christ is still up to. And those of us who are sharing this bread and sharing this cup. Because when we come to this table to get our relationships right, we are coming to be renewed. So that we might thirdly and finally share the work of deliverance. The text says in verse 21, deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau. And the kingdom will be the Lord's. Read the text, church. The text says, when the people of God have gotten it right with each other, the Lord will raise up His people to be deliverers. What we will find, if the text is right, if God be truth and the devil a liar, we will find that when the people of God get their relationships with each other right, that the world will get right. And in case you've been living under a rock for the past year, the world desperately needs to get right. We have seen time and time again, and history has proven over and over, that politicians and charismatic leaders are not going to get the world right. Even the best of them. Since that is the case, Lord knows we're not going to get it right anytime soon. So the only chance the world stands of getting it right is if the people of God, if the church of the resurrected Lord Jesus Christ will rise up in the power of God. The power that comes from being in right relationship with our brothers and sisters to be deliverers in the world. We know all too well that there are some evils from which this world needs to be delivered. The world needs to be delivered from vain pride and nationalism. The world needs to be delivered from economic greed that commodifies people. The world needs to be delivered from racism, sexism, ableism, and all other isms. The world needs to be delivered from poor educational systems and unjust tax structures that make it impossible to get ahead. engineering that produces unprecedented nuclear weapons. And since the world needs to be delivered, there needs to be some deliverers who rise up. The world needs some people who will share this bread without deceit. The world needs some people who will share this cup without denouncing. The world needs some people who will share in the work of deliverance. And the Bible says that after the deliverers have finished their work, after their deliverers have kept their hand to the plow, after the deliverers have called out the wicked ways of the world, after the deliverers have proclaimed that a new world is coming, that the new world will indeed come down, and the kingdom will be the Lord. And there is no kingdom like unto our God. For they tell me that in the Lord's kingdom there is plenty good room. That means that everybody, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, rich, poor, middle class, no class, able, disabled, sick, well, everybody has a seat at this table. They tell me that in the Lord's kingdom that I got shoes, you got shoes, all God's children got shoes, my Lord. That means that in the Lord's kingdom every need will be met and no one will lack for anything. They tell me that in the Lord's kingdom that King Jesus is the captain. That means we don't have any rigged elections. We won't be divided on partisan politics, because the Bible says that the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. So church, I don't know about you, but I'm trying to get to the Lord's kingdom today. For on Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's bright, fair, and happy land, where my possessions lie. I'm bound for the promised land today. I'm bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? No church, they used to sing, come on, come on, come on. Don't you want to go? Won't you be a deliverer today? For we're marching to Zion. Beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion. It's that beautiful city of God. Won't you be a deliverer, church? The hymn writer told us how. He said how to reach the masses, men of every birth. For an answer, Jesus gave the key. He said, if I